Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. And today we'll be discussing the chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases. So in today's session, we'll be discussing the NCERT section 4.5 and 4.6. And this is the part 3 of the lecture. Now before starting the lecture, just want to give you one information that the images, text and other materials used in our presentations are for education purposes only. We respect the intellectual property rights of the original creators and owners. If you are the owner and have any concerns or issues, please contact us at sathee@itk.ac.in and we shall remove the content immediately. Please note that parts of the content may have been generated using generative AI, which is experimental. Okay, so what are the objectives of today's session? So we will understand the neural control of breathing by respiratory centers. So in the previous sessions, we talked about the mechanism of breathing. We talked about how the air is inhaled, how the air is exhaled out. So we talked about the inspiration and the expiration, also known as inhalation. Okay. And then exhalation. Today we'll be talking about the neural control. Clear? Means we'll be talking about the regions present in the nervous system, in the brain. Okay, these regions control the breathing rate, they control the breathing. Okay, so there are respiratory centers within the brain. We'll talk about that. Then we will understand the chemical regulation by carbon dioxide, oxygen, and we'll also understand the role of the pH, okay, in regulating the breathing. Okay, then we will identify common respiratory disorders. So we'll talk about some common respiratory disorders such as asthma, bronchitis, and pneumonia. Okay, we'll talk about the symptoms of these diseases and the possible treatments of these respiratory conditions. So these diseases or disorders can be treated, okay, if they are detected early. Clear? So there is complete cure for these diseases. Okay, we'll talk about the impact of lifestyle factors on respiratory health. So some of the respiratory health disorders, they are linked to our lifestyle. Like smoking can cause respiratory disorders. Then there are some disorders, respiratory disorder related to your occupation. Okay, we'll talk about that also. Okay, so we'll be talking about regulation of respiration today, which is the NCERT section 14.5. Okay, we'll also talk about disorders of respiratory system, which is NCERT section 14.6. Then we will summarize this entire lecture. We'll also talk about NCERT based questions. Okay, and then there'll be some keynotes that will help you memorize these topics. And in the end, there'll be some interesting questions for you that will enhance your critical thinking ability. So let's start with today's session. We'll be talking about regulation of respiration today, or you can say regulation of breathing. Now, we know that the body maintains a steady respiratory rhythm through neural and chemical controls. So you can see here what they are writing. They are saying that this respiratory rhythm is being controlled by what? Neural means the nervous system. Okay, as well as the chemical. So some chemicals are also controlling this respiratory rhythm, and the nervous system is also controlling the respiratory rhythm. Okay, what is respiratory rhythm actually? How can we define respiratory rhythm? So respiratory rhythm is basically, it refers to the pattern and timing of the breaths. Clear? So pattern of your breathing and timing of breathing, this is known as respiratory rhythm. Or simply you can say the frequency of the breath, means breaths per minute. Here, this is known as respiratory rhythm. So these are controlled through neural and chemical. Clear? Now let's talk about first neural regulation of respiration. Now there are some respiratory rhythm centers in the medulla region of the brain. Okay, so this is the primary control center. So here the question can come, what is the primary control center that regulates the respiration? So answer will be, there are some respiratory rhythm centers in the medulla. Clear? This is the primary control center that generates the basic breathing rhythm. Okay, means inspiration and expiration. Okay, we have already talked about this respiratory rhythm. Clear? It is the pattern of breathing, means breaths per minute. This is controlled by a region present in the medulla, and this is the primary control center. This is known as respiratory rhythm center. So it controls the respiratory rhythm. So you can remember this like this. Okay, so it controls your inspiration and expiration. So here you can see in this figure, here different regions are shown to you that are present in your brain, and these centers control the breathing or they control the respiration. Clear? So there is a region known as pneumotaxic center that is present in the pons. There is a respiratory rhythm center present in the medulla. Okay, clear? So here you can see this is a region pons. Here is a pneumotaxic center present in the pons. Okay, then there is another region, apneustatic center. Okay, which is beside this pneumotaxic center. Clear? Then here this is the medulla. This consists of this dorsal respiratory group and ventral respiratory group. Okay, so here you can see this dorsal respiratory group and ventral respiratory group. These are present in medulla. This is medullatory respiratory center. This is further divided into dorsal and ventral. And then pons respiratory center is also present. Okay, and this includes your pneumotaxic center and apneustic center. And both of them, these are the respiratory control centers in the brain. Clear? So basically, there are two respiratory control centers. One is in the pons, another in the medulla. Okay. And then within pons, you can write about these two centers, and within medulla, you can write about dorsal and ventral respiratory groups. Clear? So this image, you can see this is very clear. This is clearly showing you the respiratory centers in the brain. Now let's talk about the pneumotaxic center, which is present in the pons. Now this center can moderate the signals from the rhythm center. Okay, it can reduce the duration of inspiration, thereby altering the respiratory rate. Okay, so it can, you can see it can reduce the duration of inspiration or inhalation. And by doing this though, it can alter, it can change the respiratory rate, the breathing rate. Okay, means breaths per minute. Clear? So how does it alter the respiratory rate? Because it can moderate the signals coming from the respiratory center. Clear? So this image we have already discussed. Respiratory centers were present in the medulla. Now there are some chemosensitive areas also. So where are these chemosensitive areas? They are located near the rhythm center. Here it is highly sensitive to changes in blood carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration. Clear? So what happens? How this carbon dioxide level increases in the blood? So you inhale the air and then oxygen reaches the alveoli, and from the alveoli the oxygen will diffuse into the blood. Now finally the oxygen will be, you can say, transferred to the tissues. It will diffuse into the tissues, okay, and the oxygen will be utilized in the metabolic activities such as respiration. Due to this, energy is also generated in the form of ATP, and carbon dioxide is released as a byproduct. Clear? Now this carbon dioxide dissolves in blood. So blood can carry both carbon dioxide and oxygen. Clear? So due to metabolic activities, carbon dioxide is produced, and the level of carbon dioxide can increase in the blood, and hydrogen ion concentration also. So these chemosensitive areas, these are sensitive to changes in carbon dioxide levels in the blood and hydrogen ion concentration. Now, an increase in these substances triggers signals to increase the breathing rate. Okay, if the concentration of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration increases in the blood, then this triggers signals to increase the breathing rate, or breathing rate will increase. Now the body is saying the level of carbon dioxide is more in the blood. Okay, so you need oxygen to survive, and the carbon dioxide should be expelled out. It is a kind of excretory product. The body is signaling you that the level of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions have increased. Okay, so your breathing rate will increase. So whenever your breathing rate increases, what will happen? You will inhale more air, and you will exhale also more air. So carbon dioxide will be thrown out of the body, and you will inhale more of oxygen. So question can come from here. Okay, usually questions come from here. Your breathing rate will increase or decrease when the level of carbon dioxide and hydrogen concentration increase. Okay, or what will happen when the level of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion increase or decrease? Okay, how it will affect the breathing rate? Yes, so remember this, increase in these substances will increase the breathing rate. Both are increasing. So here you can see this is image showing you chemosensitive area present in the brain. Okay, this is chemosensitive area located near to the rhythm center, and you can see here carbon dioxide when it is present in the blood. Okay, so it dissolves, it combines with water to form carbonic acid. Okay, H2CO3. H2CO3 further breaks down into hydrogen ion and HCO3, bicarbonate ion. Clear? So here you can see more of hydrogen ions are being produced. Clear? So here carbon dioxide level is also more, and hydrogen ion levels are also more. Then we were talking about the chemical regulation. Okay, let's talk about chemical regulation. Now there are some receptors in the aortic arch and the carotid artery. Okay, these also detect changes in carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration. Clear? So these increase in these substances, they also, you can say, these are also detected by the receptors present in the aortic arch and the carotid arteries. So carotid arteries, these are the major blood vessels. And what is the location of carotid arteries? They are located in the neck. Clear? That supplies blood to the brain. Okay, to the face also, and to the neck also. They deliver oxygen, they deliver nutrients also to the vital areas such as brain, face, and neck. Clear? So there are receptors present in this aortic arch and carotid arteries. Now, then they send signals to the rhythm center to make necessary adjustments. So means that your breathing rate will increase. Now, there is a note there that the role of oxygen in regulating the respiratory rhythm is quite insignificant. So, carbon dioxide plays a major role here, not oxygen. So, again, a question can come from here. Does oxygen play a significant role in regulating the respiratory rhythm or carbon dioxide? So, answer will be carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide regulates or plays a significant role in regulating the respiratory rhythm and not oxygen. Role of oxygen is quite insignificant. Okay, so here you can see this is image showing you regulation of the respiration. Here you can see this is the brain. Here brain has the center cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex controls this voluntary control over breathing. Clear? Voluntary means which are under your control. Okay, so you can deliberately inhale and exhale. Forcefully, you can inhale and exhale. So you are voluntarily doing it. Okay, this is controlled by the cerebral cortex. So there are some other receptors also. Okay, clear? That are not related to breathing here. Then there are respiratory centers in medulla and pons. Okay, here you can see they are the respiratory centers, main respiratory centers. Clear? Then there are some other receptors also they have shown in this image. Then there are some peripheral chemoreceptors here. These chemoreceptors are present near to the rhythm center. Clear? Here carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion plays a crucial role. Oxygen doesn't have any significant role in regulating the respiratory rhythm. Clear? Then there are some respiration receptors in the muscles and joints also. Clear? And they have also listed some other receptors in this figure. So basically, we have to concentrate on the respiratory centers in the medulla and the pons and the chemoreceptors. Now let's talk about the disorders of the respiratory system. So we have completed the topic regulation of the respiration. Okay, we'll be starting with this topic disorders of the respiratory system. Okay. Now let's talk about this. So first is asthma. So what is asthma? Asthma is basically inflammation of the bronchi and the bronchioles, often due to an allergic reaction. Okay. So trachea, it divides into bronchi, left and right bronchi. Bronchi further divides into bronchioles. So when there is an inflammation in bronchi and bronchioles, which is basically due to allergic reactions, this is known as asthma. Now, what are the symptoms? Difficulty in breathing, because obviously the bronchi and bronchioles, they are inflamed. Okay, so this will block the air passage. So there will be difficulty in breathing, and this will lead to wheezing and shortness of breath. Here you can see this is the image showing you a person which is suffering from asthma. Clear? On the left, they have shown you a person having normal lungs. And here you can see muscles are relaxed here. Okay, this is the normal lining. Clear? And normal amount of mucus. And here in asthmatic lung, muscles they tighten. Here you can see these are the swollen linings of the bronchi. Okay, there is an inflammation here. And excess mucus is also produced. So this blocks the airway or air passage. Clear? So muscles they tighten and there is a difficulty in breathing. Now next is emphysema. Now, what is the difference between asthma and emphysema? So emphysema is a chronic disorder. Now what do you mean by chronic actually? So disease can be acute or it can be chronic. Chronic diseases means these diseases are from a very long duration. Okay, maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years. These are chronic disorders. Acute is a recent disease. Okay, so these chronic disease are very dangerous actually. Now, the chronic disorders, these are asymptomatic also. So symptom doesn't appear. The person doesn't know that he's suffering from a disease. So a chronic disorder, okay, most commonly caused by cigarette smoking. Yeah, so here a question can come, which disorder is caused by, which respiratory disorder is caused by smoking? So answer will be emphysema. Now what happens in emphysema? The alveoli walls are damaged. Remember this. In asthma, bronchi and bronchioles, there was inflammation in bronchi and bronchioles. In emphysema, the alveolar walls are damaged here, and alveoli, they are involved in exchange of gases. Okay, so this drastically reduces the surface area available for gaseous exchange. So in alveoli, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs because alveoli is highly vascularized. It is surrounded by thin-walled blood capillaries. So if the alveolar walls are damaged, then obviously it will affect the diffusion of the gases, exchange of the gases. So this is an image showing you emphysema. It is caused by smoking. So you can see in emphysema, you can see here, lungs, the color of the lungs will also change actually. Okay, but this is in very severe case. Here on left side, a healthy lung is shown to you. And here you can see alveoli are affected. Large cavities are formed with carbon deposits. You can see carbon have deposited here in the alveoli. Clear? Then there is inflammation. Here, there is damage to the alveolar walls. And these are the alveoli of the healthy person shown you on the left. Clear? Now next, let's talk about the occupational respiratory disorders. So some of the respiratory disorders, these are related to the occupation of the person. Okay. One of the disorder related to lifestyle was emphysema. Okay, the person is smoking from a very long time. This is your lifestyle. Okay, then this is occupational respiratory disorders. Now, what is the cause? Long-term exposure to harmful dust in certain industries, for example, stone grinding or mining. So, the people who are working in such kind of industries such as stone grinding or mining, they are exposed to very harmful dust particles. So long-term exposure to these dust particles can cause some respiratory disorders. It leads to fibrosis in the lungs. What do you mean by fibrosis? There is a development of fiber in the lungs. Okay, so the person will not able to breathe because this fiber has developed in the lungs. Okay, fibrosis means growth of fibrous connective tissue. Okay, because of this, the person cannot breathe also. So this can cause serious damage, and these are actually irreversible. Okay, here you can see this is the image showing you silicosis. These are some of the occupational respiratory disorder. First one is silicosis. Okay, so these dust particles, they enter the alveoli. They can damage the alveoli. And then asbestosis. Here asbestosis fibers, they can damage the lungs. Okay, on the left side, healthy lung is shown to you here in asbestosis. On the right side, you can see these asbestosis fibers can enter into your lungs. Okay, this is the asbestosis fiber they have shown to you. Okay, which can even cause cancer here. So these are occupational respiratory disorders. Now, example is silicosis and asbestosis. How can you prevent occupational respiratory disorders? So you can wear protective mask. Okay, this is very crucial for the workers who are working in these sort of industries. Here, this figure we have already discussed. Okay. Now, we have discussed the theory. We talked about the regulation of respiration, and we also talked about the respiratory disorders. Okay. Within respiratory disorders, we talked about asthma. Okay. We talked about emphysema, and we also talked about occupational respiratory disorders. Clear? So you should know about the difference between asthma and emphysema. Okay, this can come in your exam. Then you should know about the various occupational respiratory disorders. Clear? We talked about silicosis and asbestosis. Clear? So these disorders, they are different from the other disorders. So don't confuse it with the cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disorder. It is due to defect in the gene. Clear? In cystic fibrosis also, you have difficulty in breathing, but that is a genetic disorder. Clear? It is caused by a defective gene that makes the body produce abnormally thick and sticky fluid called mucus. So more amount of mucus is being produced. And this mucus, they build up in the breathing passage of the lungs. Okay, and this buildup of the mucus can be life-threatening. Yeah, it can cause a lot of infections also. Okay, clear? So let's summarize the entire lecture. We talked about the regulation of the respiration. Okay, so this is controlled by respiratory centers in medulla oblongata and the pons. So medulla oblongata and pons, they control these. They consist of these respiratory centers. Then there are chemoreceptors also, which monitor carbon dioxide, oxygen, and pH levels in the blood. Basically, carbon dioxide plays a very significant role in regulating the respiratory rhythm. Oxygen doesn't play any significant role. Okay, pH level also. Okay, pH level means hydrogen ion concentration. Okay, this also plays a significant role in regulating the respiratory rhythm. Then there are some stress receptors that regulate breathing depth and rate. Stress receptors were also present. We have seen in the lungs. Then autonomic nervous system maintains respiratory rhythm. Okay, so nervous system can be divided into autonomic nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Autonomic nervous system, this maintains the rhythm, respiratory rhythm. Then we talked about the respiratory disorders. We talked about asthma. Okay, where there is inflammation of the bronchi and the bronchioles. Then we talked about bronchitis. Bronchitis is what? This is inflammation of the bronchial tubes. Okay, we talked about the emphysema also. Okay, then pneumonia. Pneumonia is also lung infection. Pneumonia can be caused by bacteria. It can be caused by virus. It can be caused by fungus also. In pneumonia, lungs are infected and there is a deposition of fluid in the lungs in case of pneumonia. Okay. Then tuberculosis. This is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is the bacteria which causes infection of the lungs. Okay, it is also known as TB, tuberculosis. Then COPD, this is chronic airflow blockage. Then there is sleep apnea, which is breathing interruption during sleep. The lung cancer, this is abnormal cell growth in the lungs. So this is some additional information. So you should know about these common diseases actually. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, sleep apnea. Clear? Now let's discuss some questions which are based on these topics. So here the first question is, explain how chemosensitive area regulates breathing. Okay, how it regulates the breathing rate. So what would be the answer to this question? Okay, so what you should tell what are chemosensitive areas and how do they regulate breathing. Clear? Now you should know about this also. What is breathing rate? So every term is important here. Okay, this question is related to the topic regulation of respiration. So what will be the answer? So let's have a look at the answer. Okay, so chemosensitive area regulation of breathing rate. Let's talk about this. Now these centers are located in the medulla oblongata of the brainstem. And these centers, they monitor blood carbon dioxide levels and the change in the pH means a change in the hydrogen ion concentration. Okay, so we have talked about this, how hydrogen ions are produced. So the, you can say carbon dioxide combines with water. And then what happens when water combines with carbon dioxide, carbonic acid is produced. Carbonic acid is broken down into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ions. Okay, clear? Now next. So these centers, they detect increased carbon dioxide levels, which forms carbonic acid in blood, lowering the pH. Clear? So we have discussed earlier how carbonic acid get dissociated into hydrogen ion and carbon dioxide and bicarbonate ions, and hydrogen ions are produced, thus lowering the pH of the blood. Yes. So you know the relationship between the hydrogen ions and the pH. Clear? Now let's move on to the next one. So here this image showing you the chemosensitive areas. Here the reaction is also given to you. Here the carbon dioxide combines with water to form carbonic acid HCO3, and it breaks down into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ions. These hydrogen ions which are produced here, okay, the number of these hydrogen ion increases, and if the hydrogen ion concentration increases, then pH will be low. Okay, so high concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution will cause the pH to be low. Clear? So high concentration of hydrogen means low pH. Low concentration of hydrogen means high pH. Okay. So when the pH is low, it means, or what does it indicate? It indicates the acidity. Okay. When the pH is high, or when the hydrogen concentration is less, it will indicate the basicity. So when the blood is slightly acidic due to high concentration of hydrogen ions, okay, and due to high concentration of carbon dioxide, then what will happen? The breathing rate will increase. Clear? Now what will happen if the breathing rate will increase? Okay, you will inhale more, you will exhale more. Clear? So carbon dioxide will be eliminated out of your body. Clear? So this is the chemosensitive, you can say, response. So earlier we have studied the respiration is controlled by, or the respiration rate is controlled by, or respiration rhythm is controlled by nervous system, as well as there is the chemical control also. Okay, so now when pH decreases, when the pH is less, means when the hydrogen ion concentration is more, means when the blood become acidic, then the chemoreceptors are stimulated. Now what happens? What does these chemoreceptors do? Okay. Now these chemoreceptors send signals to the respiratory control center, which is located in the medulla. And after that, what happens? The breathing rate will increase. Okay. So this will trigger an increase in the breathing rate and the depth of expel excess carbon dioxide. So the breathing rate will increase, Okay, and you can say the depth means the intensity of the breathing will also increase. Okay, so this will expel out the excess carbon dioxide, and the pH will then again become low. It will be lowered. It will be higher then, because earlier it was low. Okay, now this chemosensitive, you can say, system or receptor, they also respond to low oxygen levels. Okay, but that is not that much significant, we have studied. But they also respond to low oxygen levels through peripheral chemoreceptors in the carotid or the aortic bodies. But we have discussed that the role of oxygen is insignificant actually. But there is some regulation, okay, done by low oxygen levels as well. Okay, so this works with the respiratory centers to maintain optimum blood gas levels. So there should be optimum concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Okay, so you can see how nicely everything is being regulated. Now, so this feedback system ensures proper oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal from the tissues or from the body. So this helps maintain blood pH within the normal range of 7.35 to 7.45. Okay, so this is the neutral pH. So neutral pH is around 7. Below 7 it is acidic. Okay, above 7 it is alkaline or basic. So whenever the pH is lowered due to high hydrogen ion concentration, then these chemo sensitive receptors, they get activated and your breathing rate will increase. Okay, now let's discuss next question. How does occupational lung disease develop? This question is related to occupational respiratory disorders. So what do you mean first by occupational respiratory disorders? Okay, so what will be the answer? So let's discuss the answer for this question. Now, occupational lung diseases develop through prolonged exposure to harmful substances in workplace environments. Okay, these harmful substances can be dust, it can be some chemicals, it can be some volatile gases or fumes. So these fumes, these gases, these chemicals, even the dust, okay, like silica, they can damage the lungs. They get accumulated in the alveoli or they can get accumulated in the lungs. They can cause inflammation. Okay, they can cause damage to the alveoli. Clear? So these are very harmful. So prolonged exposure to these substances can lead to respiratory disorders. So what are the examples of respiratory disorders? These examples were silicosis, asbestosis. Now, inhalation of these irritants that accumulate in lung tissues over time. So whenever the person inhales these harmful substances, this will irritate your lung tissues, and these can get accumulated also in the lung tissues, and this can damage the tissues, lung tissues over time. It can even cause development of fibers in the lungs. Okay, sometimes these inflammatory responses are triggered by foreign particles in the lungs. Okay, so these are irritants. They can cause certain inflammatory response in the tissues of the lungs. So, like our immune system, it can differentiate between self and non-self. Okay, so these are foreign particles. So these foreign particles, when they enter into the lungs, they irritate the tissues of the lung. Okay, they irritate them, and because of this irritation, there is an inflammation in these tissues. So inflammation response is triggered by these foreign particles in the lungs. Okay, so examples are silicosis and asbestosis. So silica or asbestos fibers, they get accumulated in the lungs Okay, they can get accumulated in the alveoli and they can trigger inflammatory responses. Okay, they can cause sort of allergy because these are foreign particles. Okay, now this can lead to development of scar tissue. Okay, also known as fibrosis due to repeated injury. So what happens? How these fibers develop actually? Okay, so your cells are damaged and they repair, and then again your cells are damaged and then again they repair itself. Okay, these cells they damage and they repair themselves. Now, because of this continuous process, the fibers, the tissues, they get transformed into these fibers, and now they cannot be repaired now. So this, whenever the fibers develop, then it cannot be reversed back. So due to this repeated injury by these harmful substances, fibers develop in the lungs, and then the person will be have difficulty in breathing. Okay, clear? Similarly, this kind of you can say fibers can develop in the liver also. Okay, when the liver cells, they have the capability to regenerate. Okay, so liver cells die and they regenerate, they die and regenerate, and finally these cells, they lose the capability to regenerate and they develop into these fibers. Okay, but that is different from these occupational respiratory disorders. Okay, this image we have already discussed, image showing you silicosis and asbestosis. Now, what happens here? There's a weakening of protective mechanism in the respiratory system. Yes, so there are some protective mechanisms. Okay, so we have the immune system. The immune system protects us from the foreign particles. Okay, so our immune system helps us to protect. It causes inflammation. Clear? Now, sometimes there is interaction between genetic factors and the environmental exposures also. Environmental exposures are these irritants. Okay, clear? In some individuals, there is a heightened response sometimes. Clear? Some are very, you can say, sensitive to these harmful substances. Some can tolerate them. Okay, so there is a repeated damage and this progressive damage. Okay, or due to exposure of long time exposure to these harmful substances, okay, can cause damage to the lung cells and the tissues. Okay, so there is a compromised immune system responses, immune system. Okay, now the duration and intensity of exposure plays a crucial role in disease progression. So how long you have been exposed to these substances, okay, and how much intensity means how much quantity of that harmful substances you have been exposed. So both of these play a crucial role in disease progression. Common examples include asbestosis, silicosis, and coal workers pneumoconiosis. Clear? Now, next question: how is the majority of carbon dioxide transported in the blood? Okay. So, what are the options here? This is the multiple choice questions. Option number A, dissolved in the plasma. Option number B, bound to hemoglobin. Option number C, as bicarbonate, and option number D is attached to white blood cells. So what will be the correct answer? Okay, they are asking majority of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide can be transported in more than one ways. Okay, it can be transported in 2 or 3 ways. Okay, some of the ways are written here, but majority of the carbon dioxide transported in blood through which process? So let's have a look at the answer. Okay, as bicarbonate ion, option number C is the correct answer. Now let's have a look at the explanation. So carbon dioxide is primarily transported in the blood as bicarbonate ions, means HCO3 plus, which is formed by reaction of carbon dioxide with water in the red blood cells. Okay, so answer will be bicarbonate ions. Not bound to hemoglobin. This is not the correct answer. Okay, although carbon dioxide can bind to hemoglobin, but majority of the carbon dioxide is transported in the blood as bicarbonate ions. How are bicarbonate ions produced? When carbon dioxide combines with water. Clear? Then carbonic acid is produced. Carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. The next one, which of the following structure is primarily responsible for filtering, warming and humidifying the inhaled air? What will be the correct answer here? Okay. Bronchioles, alveoli, nasal cavity of a diaphragm. Okay, which of the following structure filters the air, it warms the air and humidifies the inhaled air? Okay, so let's have a look at the correct answer here. Answer is option number C, nasal cavity is the correct answer. Let's have a look at the explanation. See, nasal cavity contain hairs as well as mucus. These hairs and mucus, they trap the dust and the debris, they trap the, you can say, some pathogens also. Okay, it humidifies the air as well. Okay, so it filters the air. Okay, it warms the air, it humidifies the air. Okay, this mucous membrane can trap these dust and the pathogens also. Clear? So nasal cavity contain hair and mucus that trap dust and debris, and the mucous membrane lining the cavity helps to warm and moisten the air. Okay, this mucous membrane can also trap the some of the pathogens, airborne pathogens, as well as the dust as well. The next question, what is the effect of high altitude on the partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere? Okay, what happens to the partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude? Suppose you are going on the mountains, then what will be the partial pressure of oxygen? So what is partial pressure of any gas? It is the pressure exerted by individual gas in a mixture of gas. This is a partial pressure. So will it increase, decrease, remain the same, or fluctuates randomly? What would be the correct answer? So let's have a look at the answer. Okay, correct answer is option number B, decrease. Okay, so what happens at higher altitude? Atmospheric pressure decreases. Okay, and with it, the partial pressure of all the gases, including oxygen, will decrease. Clear? So answer will be option number B, decreases. Okay, and the person will have difficulty in breathing as well. Now, the people living in mountains, you can see, even their face, they are quite red, and they can, you can say, breathe easily. Okay, they don't have any difficulty in breathing. So why this happens? Because these persons, they have more number of RBCs. So this is the kind of adaptations. The more number of RBCs, okay, means more hemoglobin, because hemoglobin is present in RBCs. Okay, and this hemoglobin can bind to more oxygen. Okay, so their oxygen demand is, you can say, completed because they have more RBCs and their skin also appears red because of more number of RBCs. More number of RBCs means more number of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a red color pigment. Okay. The next question, which respiratory disorder is characterized by the inflammation and narrowing of the airways, making it difficult to exhale? So what will be the correct answer here? Options. Option A is emphysema, B is asthma, C is pneumonia, and D is tuberculosis. What will be the correct answer? So let's have a look at the answers. The answer will be option number B, asthma. Asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease of the airways that causes them to narrow and swell, leading to wheezing, shortness of breath, and coughing. So there is the inflammation of the bronchi and the bronchioles. Okay? And the person will have difficulty in breathing. And these are the symptoms of asthma. Okay? Wheezing, shortness of breath, and coughing. Okay? So you get these sort of questions in the exam, okay, as well as in the NEET exam as well. Now, next question, which part of the brain plays a crucial role in regulating the rate and depth of breathing? So, options are cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla oblongata, and hypothalamus. So let's have a look at the answer. Okay, so answer is option number C, medulla oblongata. Okay, this is the correct answer. Explanation, medulla oblongata, a part of the brain stem, contains respiratory centers that control the muscles involved in breathing. Okay. Now, next question, a person has a tidal volume of 500 ml. Here, this is related to the tidal volume and capacities, and an inspiratory reserve volume of 2500 ml and an expiratory reserve volume of 1500 ml. What is their vital capacity? Options are 3000 ml, 4000 ml, 4500 ml, and 5000 ml. What will be the correct answer? So let's have a look at the answer. Answer is option number C, 4500 ml. So vital capacity is the maximum volume of air a person can exhale after a maximum inhalation. Okay, what is the formula? Tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume plus expiratory reserve volume means 500 plus 2500 plus 1500. This is 4500 ml. So you should remember all the formulas also. Okay. So now let's talk about some of the key notes here, some of the key points that will help you memorize these topics. So respiratory rhythm is controlled by centers in medulla oblongata and pons. There are some chemoreceptors which detect carbon dioxide, oxygen, and pH level in the blood. Now, yawning is triggered by low oxygen levels in the brain. Okay, remember this. Exercise can increase breathing rate up to 40 to 60 breaths per minute. Now, some disorders are respiratory disorder. Asthma affects over 300 million people worldwide. Sleep apnea causes breathing to stop 30 plus times per hour. Okay, now COPD is the third leading cause of death globally. COVID-19 revealed how respiratory virus can rapidly spread worldwide. Okay, some interesting questions for you. Question number 1 is, how do chemoreceptors in the carotid bodies detect changes in the blood carbon dioxide level? Okay, so think about this question. This is a very nice question. Question number 2, what role does the medulla oblongata play in maintaining the respiratory rhythm? Okay, so there are some centers in the medulla Okay, you have to explain the role of these centers in maintaining the respiratory rhythm. Third question is compare and contrast emphysema and chronic bronchitis. And fourth question is how does pneumonia affect alveolar gas exchange? Okay, so these are some of the questions, okay, you should think about. Okay, this will help you understand these topics as well. So this is the end of this session. I hope this session was quite knowledgeable for you. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.